Welcome to VidMark, a podcast to give you the video marketing knowledge to always hit the mark. Let us help build your confidence with video strategy and content creation best practices. Join us weekly for pro tips and guest interviews as we explore the powerful communication tool of video. It's time to boost your business. Let's talk video. All right, welcome back to the VidMark podcast. I'm very excited to be joined by two special guests, Sharon O'Connor and Kyle. Why am I blanking on your last name? You can just go ahead and say it.
Kyle Glenn.
Kyle Glenn. Awesome. I'm going to jump right into your guys' intro. Story Gorge LLC is a vibrant and upcoming visual story production company based in the Columbia River Gorge. Every project holds a strong focus on social or environmental stewardship, often leading us to unique and adventurous situations. Imagery is at the core, and education is the mechanism for which they use to contribute to the community. Strategic partnerships allow us to further align with these entities and do the work that you guys do. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. This is awesome.
Sure, man. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and it's pretty... I was like kind of, going through how we know each other and all the different connections and how the whole Portland world is interconnected. And I think, Sean, you were one of the first videographers I met in Portland when I first was fresh out of school, didn't know anything, didn't know anything, came up to Portland. You were one of the first people I met at the Rebuilding Center. And do you want to talk about that? And that might be a good segue into the backstory. And then Kyle, we can kind of talk about your backstory as well.
Yeah, man. Thank you. I'm glad you brought that up because really the work that was going on there, it was the foundational core of what Story Gorge is now today. I started doing this professionally, having a camera in my hand 19 years ago. I've been at this for a heartbeat. And it's led to all sorts of incredible opportunities around the world. It's been a wonderful vehicle. And, somewhere in there it went from stills to video to a nice healthy mix of both. But freelancing's hard. It's really hard. And so, life situations happened. I grew up and had a child and had more needs. And I knew really clearly that I wanted to continue to do the work I was doing by using my skill sets and tools as something for community benefit. And that's a hard order to fill in the working world. I was very lucky to find at Rebuilding Center at the time, Our United Villages was their core name. And I sat down with them on the Community Legacy Program, which really is the core of what they do. So if you're familiar with the Rebuilding Center, it's 53,000 square feet of upcycled building materials, deconstruction, keeping building materials out of the waste stream and getting them back out for projects. And it's a pretty incredible environmental and social effort in its own right. But the building materials were a backdrop for the community work, which was the core of the organization and how it started. So there was this group within that organization of, I think, 35 employees, and there was 3 of us that were doing the Community Legacy Program and the executive director. And so our job was to take some of that resource that came from recycled, upcycled building materials and to flip some of that resource into community-based projects that were doing good on the neighborhood level and to resource people with everything except money, right? We'd resource them through with connections and help and all of this to help them build their ideas into action to help. And they didn't necessarily want to start international nonprofits. They maybe wanted to start a soccer league or open up their garage on weekends to teach bike mechanics or something like that. Seemingly minor things that made a huge difference to their neighbors. And without resource to do it. And so we were that bridge, and we were able to do that on other people's garbage, essentially, which is really cool. We weren't allowed to write grants for anything except capital equipment. So knowing what I knew about storytelling, I was able to kind of, through that, create my own job description and create a program that was really designed to get working professionals or interested people in media creation to use some of their skills to volunteer to create content that would then support these community ideas, right? Pretty amazing. And I could write grants for things like equipment. And so I was able to build an in-house production studio, and we had over 20 volunteers that were filmmakers, photographers, sound engineers, graphic designers that would come in for short little gigs, free gigs, a volunteer to support some other project in Portland. So it was really rad, right? I mean, it was this full circle. There was never a dollar exchanged, and we did. I mean, I'd like to say hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of work without exchanging a penny, and it really challenged the system of how this stuff could work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, I want to acknowledge you and say thank you for the work that you've done, and that's gonna like continue to grow. And I really appreciate how you found a way to like use your powers of storytelling and video production for good, and been able to elevate other people and build this community. And I think that was super beneficial. I want to give Kyle a chance here to be able to say a few things too, and we'll come back and maybe we can dive into because. Sean, I was looking through your backstory. You've done some really cool stuff with, rock climbing in your early career. Maybe we have some cool stories in there. But Kyle, do you want to introduce yourself and kind of talk about, why you're so passionate about video production and Story Gorge?
Yeah, absolutely. First, to kind of bring it full circle, talk about how I met you. I thought that was pretty. It's funny. I met you almost 2 years ago at a house party. I was playing a show, not at a house show. I was playing a show, and you were kind enough to do photography because Alex, and it was so cool that you reached out, put this together, and then I learned about the connection between you and Sean. So that was just pretty wild. And you mentioned the smallness of Portland, but really, like, it's almost Pacific Northwest because we're out in the gorge. We're 60 miles away. We're an hour away now, and it's just cool how we've all happened to be here at this moment. But my journey in film really started when I was like 9 years old. I met my buddy Austin Hillebrecht in fourth grade, and he turned me on to this idea that, like, hey, let's spend our life, let's make movies. Let's be George Lucas, let's be Steven Spielberg. And so we kind of dedicated our path through middle school, high school, and college towards that end. And so that just looked like stealing shots in the high school. And then I went to the Art Institute of Portland, where I met a really great cohort. I had some great mentors there and a strong group of classmates. And 4 of us started a company called Quarter Orange out of the gate. And our goal was to make, this is like boutique production company. We want to make really high quality, high production value content for small budgets. And I think, it's kind of like how a lot of us creatives start out, for better or worse. I think too, it has a lot to do with that value you place on yourself as a young creative. We come out of school, we don't think we're quite ready to be, and probably aren't quite ready to be the highest ticket item, definitely not the highest ticket, but, we undersell ourselves a lot. And so we came out in 2008 and we made a go of it for about 4 years in Portland post 2008 economic disaster. It was a tough time to graduate, but we got to start doing some nonprofit stuff, and we worked with Stand for Children Oregon, doing some documentary work, and that was kind of like my first foray into doing more documentary based storytelling. At the same time, we were creating a lot of music videos. We were keeping ourselves creatively going on music videos, and we made a 45-minute feature film called Evidence of the Sasquatch. And so we just kind of kept that going. We were all working jobs, and my job primarily was in the film and television industry in Portland as a production assistant and assistant director on things like Little People Big World and Grimm. I just kind of cut my teeth on all those shows and really learning how these big productions work and being able to apply that to what we were doing with Quarter Orange. But eventually Quarter Orange disbanded, and two of my partners moved down to the Bay, and I followed them down there. And I spent about 5 years doing documentary storytelling, mostly around health and wellness in the Bay. And really just, that's where the fire got lit for me for storytelling. And seeing the impact of somebody sharing their story, one, on themselves, like feeling heard, feeling felt, feeling seen and connecting to their story. And then 2, the impact of, an audience member seeing a story and realizing, oh, that's me. Like, I didn't even know that, like, I tell this story, this guy he was in a lot of pain, and he could barely stand or walk for very long. So he started seeing this chiropractor, and within a month he was running again. Not a lot, just a little stints, but it was big. And the impact for that for me was like, you could have somebody who's watching that video that doesn't even realize how small their world has gotten, that their horizons have come down, and they're just living in this box. And it's kind of like that when you have something on the wall and you stop seeing it, right? Like when you're living inside that box, you don't even know that there's greater potential out there for you. So the power of storytelling for people to see that potential in themselves and connect to another human being through that person sharing their story was big. And I said, that's how I want to help this world kind of, and humanity stay here and connect with Mother Earth, is through storytelling. So.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And you kind of took the words out of my mouth when it came to cutting your teeth on and getting all these experiences that it kind of keeps building on itself, and you don't really know if you're ready at the time. And then you mentioned, being able to that's what I love about videos. It gives people perspective. You're able to, really share a story or with someone anywhere in the world, because video is shareable. You can put it on YouTube, put it on whatever platform, and someone on the other side of the world can, you evoke a similar kind of feeling. So here, this person on the other side of the world is feeling this thing, seeing themselves in this video, depending on how you created it. But is it a similar story for you, Sean? Cutting your teeth, that journey. You want to talk about the early stages of? I know you come from the photo world and then made the shift into video.
Yeah. So for me, this all started early college, really. So I originally went into to become an adventure educator. I was a wilderness guide. I was a rock climbing guide, and I thought that I was going to be, working in the industry of teaching people how to be outside in safe and effective ways. And I went that route with a really strong focus on kind of brand it and gear support and full on outdoor industry. And so I was in college, and I went to school for adventure education. So academic orientation was a 21-day backpacking trip through the Southwest. If you were going to learn marine biology, you had a snorkel and mask on in Keno Bay, and you were learning marine biology, right? It was very hands-on, very adventure-based, 30-day blocks of time, one class in the field. Geology was a rock climbing class, right? So a very unique form of education. And that was after the National Outdoor Leadership School, NOLS. The next thing was Prescott College. So I was a very avid rock climber, and we were out on this one pretty long, deep desert climb that was a couple miles from the car. And we got done with a long day and a whole lot of weight on. And I was hiking off and not really paying attention, tired, hot, thirsty, and had a series of falls that led to a broken ankle. So I went to my advisor and kind of devastated, like, what's next? I can't go to any of these field classes. Like, do I need to drop out for a short time? Like, what are we going to do here? And they're like looking at transcripts, like, oh, take an art class. It's like, all right. And I closed my eyes, like you would spin a globe, and like, oh, I'm going there. Close my eyes and hit darkroom, photo 101, and jumped into the darkroom, and that was the beginning of the end. I met a guy who had come from studying at the Rocky Mountain School of Photography in Montana, and he gave me my first pro camera. He was my peer. He was my same age. While I was at Knowles, he was at RMSP. We both ended up at Prescott. And I started to really embrace this thing, and I would hobble out on my crutches to the bouldering areas and start photographing my friends bouldering when I couldn't climb. And then I had this independent study idea. There was this group heading to the city of Roxton, Idaho for a 30-day intensive recreation management class. And so I talked the school into letting me grab 40 rolls of film and a bunch of ropes, and I went out for an independent study photography class that I gave myself. So my job out there that I assigned myself was to fix ropes and get them doing bolt replacements and climbing rocks and trail maintenance and be involved, but be the documentarian of. That was my first assignment. And the Climbing Magazine picked up an image, and I was like, oh, dang, I can actually mix these two together. So exhausted the program at Prescott College because it's not an art school, it's an adventure ed environmental school, and kind of took photography as far as I could there. And I tapped out of college and I went to the Rocky Mountain School of Photography on this first person's inspiration. And that's a 10-week intensive where you're in it for 8 to 12 hours a day for 10 weeks. And this is in Missoula, Montana. This was 2002 at this point, summer of, and full immersion. All of our teachers were working professionals. You know, we had National Geographic photographers, and for studio, we had people who did Porsche and Taco Bell, and architectural guys from the Midwest that were shooting like, you know, multi-million-dollar projects and all this crazy stuff. But real life, real immersion. We couldn't get a job. We couldn't do anything. And we were shooting all slide film. Digital wasn't even professionally available yet. And I kicked my career in from there, set up shop in Missoula, called it Free Solo Photography. And nothing to do with the film, although I hung on to the name. Man, I wish I had hung on to that name. I had it for like 11 years. And I set up shop and started building it out from there. And in the long run, ended up photographing pretty much every store out in the main small drag of town, and having like a kiosk at the airport for ads that we were selling to stores, and then started covering all the whitewater rafting adventures out of one company there. And that led to me like hiring all my roommates, and we converted our entire basement into a full production studio. We had tabletop set up, and we had post-production, which consisted of like 5 computer towers and a bunch of old screens, and then matting, mounting, framing, and printing in the back. And we would photograph rafting all day, and then print and pack and ship photos all night, and the whole house worked. And then I bailed out of that and became kind of a human pinball. And if there was a form of photography that you can get a job in, whether it was events, weddings, action, products, whatever, I took the gig. And I worked and worked and worked, and the camera was my vehicle for a long time, living in a pickup truck, which was kind of fun. You know, from Alaska to Vermont and the whole country in between, traveled a lot for it, and eventually kind of stumbled into Portland and rolled into Portland with a pretty nice camera and $30 in my pocket and a broken down truck, and decided it was time to just take a breath and figure out what to do. So so I rented a little tiny studio up on Northwest Portland called the Active Space, little couple square foot place with a buddy, and kept Free Solo going for quite some time. And it merged into conservation through adventure expeditions, a lot of branded support. We did some pretty cool things. We climbed, you know, a bunch of the largest trees in the world by species, and snow kited across North Dakota for wind energy. And this whole idea of doing big adventures for something much bigger than ourselves, and bigger than the summit, and not just being cool and getting free gear, but like actually having a solid message behind. And that drove my career for a long time. And then, you know, video, our camera started shooting video, and clients started asking for both. And I had a bunch of buddies that were doing film, and kind of just cut my teeth by watching and learning that way. So I have a very untraditional path. I didn't go study photography for more than 10 weeks and then a few other intensives, no degree or anything like that. And so, yeah, all that led to that kind of photo and then film career eventually, which led to working in nonprofit full-time, which led to Story Gorge today, back to full-time on our own without, and now to the point where we have 4 of us working. There's a staff, there's a very functional studio here in Hood River, and very professional, and we're still keeping all 4 of us busy every single day. You know, it's gone out of freelance and onto like a legit production company at this point.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you for giving the kind of the whole rundown. Cause it's very fascinating career. And I think the non-traditional aspect is what makes you guys unique, and what makes it, I always, I'm very impressed when people don't do things traditionally. Cause, unique. I can't think of a better word than unique, but the 2 questions that came to mind for me is that, one is that photo behind you. Is that one that you took? Nice. And then the other.
Normally I'd use my other camera and zoom in on it for you, but it went out.
Oh, that's all right.
That's the Columbia River Gorge on white salmon. And this particular image here is actually from someone's deck. What a view, right?
Yeah.
But that was part of an architectural series of shoots I was doing for stills for a window and door company that has some portfolio homes here. And so we were running around the gorge and did like 14 portfolio homes and got to see some unique views.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then it's become a signature image. It's everywhere.
Yeah, it looks sweet. And then the second question was, you guys called yourselves free solo photography. Were you actually free soloing for some of it, or?
I don't condone free soloing.
That term has become so charged with the
I know,
the movie that came out and everything. You know,
I have a history with it. So before all this happened, and I still had disposable cameras from the drugstore in my pocket, I went to Yosemite for a week-long rock climbing trip, and I left 4 months later, and stayed and lived in the valley and climbed some really big rocks and kind of focused on that for a long time. And there may or may not have been some adventures that went a lot of pitches up without ropes. And I'll just real quick caveat to say that I was in the valley. I was climbing something I had climbed a few times, very cleanly, and I was on rope, but I made some really bad decisions and put very minimal equipment, gear into the rock to hold a fall because I was overly confident. And I took about a 60-foot fall and landed on a ledge and got knocked pretty hard. Was down for quite some time, and kind of shook me out of that idea that maybe these big risks, because we're climbing strong, is not the route to go. I was 19 years old living in Yosemite. We thought we were invincible. And then through time, losing friends to some big adventures and things like that. So that word free solo, while very important to me with a history and things like that, part of the reason that company is no longer is because I was really promoting something publicly that I had some real feelings about its validity and everything else. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I'm sure that could be like its own whole podcast too. But yeah, sorry to hear about some of those struggles and things you've had to go through with all that. And but yeah, it's yeah. And that movie has brought a lot of light to it as well. So, but speaking of, I think it's really cool that you've been able to fuse like two things, rock climbing and photography, video capture. Kyle, I'd like to do, and before, we'll get into talking about Story Gorge soon enough, but talking about Kyle, you've been able to fuse two things together. I'm happy to do a shameless plug. You recently came out with an album. You've been able to fuse music and video, photo production, media production all together. Do you want to talk about how those two passions work together?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel very fortunate for many reasons to be inspired by a few different art forms and creative art forms. And I learned I think, when I really started college, I was going for film, I put my high school band to bed, kind of. It was kind of like, all right, I don't have, I'm focusing, I'm putting my eggs in this basket, and I want to, both of them are time intensive, and creativity is not a limitless resource, I don't think. And so what it provides for me right now that I'm very grateful for is music. We're creative all day long. I mean, Sean and I and everybody at Story Gorge, like whether it's a spreadsheet or whether it's, doing pre-production, could be numbers, could be editing, right? But like all of these, we bring a creative mind to, and that's taxing. And so, in my personal creativity right now, outside of Story Gorge, where I spend so much time on photography and video, music has really been that kind of outlet for me for my personal work at the time. And I think everything kind of runs in phases. Sometimes I'm really stoked on photography, but currently right now, music is my I guess, my personal outlet for creativity, because we leave so much with the work that we do, or we give so much. And one other thing that's been really helpful for that too is not being a freelancer, getting to be a staff member. I think as a freelancer from about the age of 18 or till 25, when I got my first like video gig at a school where I was there on staff, I didn't really have hobbies. I didn't even think I needed hobbies. Like filmmaking was my life, right? I was like doing Quarter Orange. I was working on sets. I was making movies. I was doing music videos, and that was awesome. But when I got a job and I had like time, like and income and resources, I started to kind of explore these other aspects of myself again. Because as great as it can be to be consumed by a creative art form, and how grateful I am that I get to make my living doing this thing that I love so much. It's really cool to also like say, oh, I'm interested in rock climbing, or, hey, I haven't played the guitar in like 8 years. And then I picked it up and I wrote a song, and, oh, this is kind of cool. So, and then it's just great that I can make my own media, although it's difficult to make my own video stuff all the time. But last weekend I was like playing around with stop motion and green screen paper to like try to make some stuff. So, and they all inform each other, but it's always an interesting thing when we talk about resources. And we talk about this at Story Gorge a lot, just time, energy, money. And I think creativity is another one of these resources that is like, that we're always constantly shuffling around. Where can we put it? How much can we draw from that well before we're spent?
Totally. Yeah, I definitely feel you. It's nice to have like consistency in your life, and then you're able to like kind of work on these other things that you might have interest. And if you don't have that, freelance life is not very consistent. It's very up and down, and you guys know the roller coaster of emotions that go along with that. Quick for the shameless plug, Kyle, do you want to say the name of your album, and just like we can put it in the show notes too?
Yeah, thank you. I know I'm still working on that part, plugging myself. Yeah, so the album is called As You Write This, The Whistle Blows, and it's my first EP as a solo artist. I also have a band in the Bay Area called Taller Younger Brother, and we're both on Spotify. Taller Younger Brother is on Spotify, and Kyle J. Glenn is how you can find me. And actually, I don't know when this is going to be released, but on the 18th of December, Taller Younger Brother is releasing a little EP. So, follow us on Spotify and keep your eyes out.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, you guys heard it here first. It'll probably come out after the 18th, but yeah, definitely everyone go check those out. And you were talking about creativity and how like finite it is, or at least it feels like that for me. Like there's only so many hours I can like edit a video from. Just like, okay, I've had the blinders on, but there's like that quote that always pops up to me. Like Maya Angelou, I think, said it, where it's the more creativity you use, like the more you have, or like you're able to build that muscle. I'm still trying to find if I like subscribe to it, but what do you think, Sean? Is creativity finite? Do you feel like you're more creative now?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I mean, creativity on demand is a really hard thing to come by, right? And as a working professional, it's been interesting over the years to kind of look at my own draw to imaging, photo, video, whatever. And for a long time there, the camera didn't come out unless somebody was paying me to have it out. It wasn't a hobby anymore. It was definitely a means to an end. And as much as it was fun and I could get in that creative zone, it just became a job like anything else. And it took some hard lessons, I think, to be able to still find that balance again of it being just strictly a creative outlet. I think quality cameras on phones had a lot to do with that, to have that ability. And I think it is finite, but as you get further along as a professional, it's a craft and it's a skill that's gained as well. So you can have a creative outcome without necessarily pushing yourself creatively too hard. And you can create space for that creativity to happen, scheduled space, which is something that I've actually, since bringing Kyle on, have been learning from him, because I'm that 2 a.m. inspiration, let's edit a film type of person, right? Like I'll stay up all night and then have a piece of art in the morning. But being a company and not a freelance and having deadlines and having multiple clients to juggle and everything, there's not always that room. So I think all that to say that creativity is finite, but I do think that it's a skill that can be learned and replicated on demand to a certain level. And should always be room for it coming naturally. Oh, I'll leave it at that.
Totally. Yeah, well put. And yeah, I can relate with that 2 a.m., working on it. I tell my fiance Emily, I'm like, I'm right in the wave of creativity. It's just like, okay, things are gelling, and it's usually after I've, you found the music and you're starting to get some like sequencing and maybe playing with the beat and having things, or cutting on the beat, any number of things that get you really excited. Do you guys have a favorite part of the? I'll leave this. Anyone wants to? Do you have a favorite part in the video production process, or something that really was the reason that brought you into video?
For me, it all comes. I mean, it all came down to the image, right? The challenge of constant composition in video for me, right? Stills are a single composition that takes a lot of pre-visualization and work to get. You're not just spray and pray, as we say, right? With video, it was a challenge of constant composition. So not only the capture of, but then that process of the B-roll lift after you go through and you gather all this footage and then you start to just pull the best of. So from capture to selections of what could be used, I think is my favorite part.
And Kyle?
Yeah, I'm going to have a tough time answering that. I think, I'm attracted to, I think one of the benefits of my background and my education is that I got to experience a lot of different aspects of filmmaking from pre to post. I would say I think the thing I enjoy the most is putting together the story, and that comes through, I think, in all aspects. That happens in production and in post, but really what we've been diving into the past few years, especially at Story Gorge, is as that pre-visualization of the story, even a documentary story. And so that's a lot of fun for me, is kind of getting to do research, get to meet these people, get to build rapport, get to kind of get into the meat of somebody's life, and then see what are the how can we utilize that to tell the best story we can, the most authentic story we can to that person, but also do it generally, because we are a company and we are being paid to share these stories. Usually there's an outcome, a desired outcome from the client, and whether that's to move people to action or insight. So, putting all those into play, I think, and then that plays in editing too, a lot too, right? Then you have the edit, the movie you write, the movie you shoot, the movie you edit, right? So then getting to kind of put that puzzle together again in the edit bay of like, we had this idea of what we were going to get. All right, now we got this stuff. But I just feel so fortunate that we get to, especially at Story Gorge, get to be in each piece of this. Both Sean and I are doing pre-production, and Whit and our other filmmaker, story producer, teaching artist. And then we're all on set, and then we're all in post getting our hands on it. And so we get to fill up all the buckets that we all got into it for, and if we have too much of one, you always got to do something you don't want to do, but we can also like pass it off to each other too and move that ball around. So just because even grabbing a camera, and Sean has to like force me to grab a camera on set sometimes. I don't know why I'm so resistant. Probably because I'm like watching the clock and stuff like that. Like, hey, we gotta get to the next thing. But when Sean's like, hey, take a camera and go get some shots, I'm like, oh, I love it. Like, I love going around and getting the close-ups and shooting dirty through some gear. Just like it's all fun. I don't know.
Yeah, totally. And you have other people like lean on, and I think that's awesome. And I think that's a good segue into talking about process, because you talked about, the video that you plan for, the video that you shoot, and then the video that you edit, like it changes all the time. And I think I have a hard time conveying that sometimes, because I'm okay with like the fluidity of the organic process of things growing, but clients or people that are paying for it sometimes are like, they want to know exactly what's going to be. But there's so many things that happen on set that are like, wow, that was like a really authentic moment. Like you could never write that kind of script or what comes across. How do you guys find like the fine line between like planning everything to allowing maybe a little bit of wiggle room for some spontaneity?
Yeah, I think, one of the biggest things that we have done at Story Gorge is created a process. And then we can share that process with our clients. This process involves for us a discovery process where we discover what they're looking to do with the video, and then also discover stories within it. And then creating what we call some keywords to kind of help narrow down and give some constraints for the storytelling, so we're all on the same page. And then we're really heavy in the pre-production, and we've moved over the past year from taking some hours and budget in post-production, and we're not getting rid of them, but we're just moving them into pre-production. And when we spend a good amount of time in pre-production, what that allows us to do, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing for pre-production, but is really allows us, like you said, to be prepared, right, to collaborate with whatever arises on set. Because there are always miracles and moments and unexpected things that arise on set. When we are prepared going into it, into a production, knowing exactly what we want to get, then we can be more efficient with our time. And then when those surprises present themselves, we are ready to follow them, right? We can chase that rabbit because we already, one, know, okay, we've gotten what we thought we needed, what we came here to get. And two, we have enough time to go for that unexpected. Our pre-production process after the discovery process and the keyword is we do research. We do we'll look at possible characters that they've sent to us. We research them through social media, through web, just kind of like getting to who is this person? What are their credentials? What's some of their history? And then we will go into these pre-interviews, which are these 30-minute usual phone calls where we try to get their story as it relates to the story that we're trying to tell. And we'll spend that 30 minutes, we'll record it just in case. We don't usually have to reference it, but it's really helpful to have and has paid off later when we could utilize that audio in the video, So we'll do the pre-interviews and then we build a story arc. And we have a process where we identify a number of plot points along the hero's journey and the 3-act structure. And so we kind of map out from what we've garnered from these pre-interviews. All right, who's going to be the strongest character? Whose character arc maps to kind of the 5 keywords that we've set out that's going to really get our audience to the insight or move them to the action that we're hoping them to take. And so we'll map out that arc on a whiteboard. We draw it all out, list out the possible plot points, and then we just kind of create our we move into just the brass tacks. When are we shooting? How are we doing that? But we create our interview questions based off of that. So we know that we're checking those boxes when we're in the interview, and so then we can kind of get those surprises when they arise, those stories that we didn't see coming.
Definitely. And I think, thank you for outlining all of that. I think it shows through in all of the work that you guys produce. All the listeners that are tuning in right now, like, pause this video and go check out storygorge.com and look at some of you guys do excellent storytelling where you're really captivating people, giving them a hook right away. So any video you click on, you're right away going to be hooked and excited about it. And you guys do an excellent job of using audio so beautifully to keep people engaged. And I mean, just like the little sound effects, those are the details that keep people excited and engaged throughout the entire video. Sean, do you want to talk about people and planning and how important that is to Story Gorge?
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate you bringing that up. So, Story Gorge exists very, very intentionally as a social enterprise, right? So if you don't know what a social enterprise is, it's not a nonprofit, and it operates like a for-profit business, but it kind of goes under the assumption that the more money you make, the more good you can do in the world. And we get mistaken as a nonprofit all the time. And I'm stoked when someone mistakes us as a nonprofit. That's very much by design, right? And it gives us a really clear ability to very, very actively support nonprofits and member organizations and cause-based groups and things like that. So like the past, we did conservation through adventure expedition. It's matured to not just the adventure and the conservation, while that's still important. It's matured to that everything we do has a positive impact on people or planet all the time. And that boils down to a couple things. It boils down to the clients we work with are 95% of the time, 98% of the time, very aligned with that. They have something. They're trying to move their audience to insider action, like Kyle said. And so we're able to utilize our storytelling skills and visual production skills to help enhance that and bring that forward. If they're not aligned with that, it's very rare we take on commercial work. If we do take on commercial work, there's a real solid focus on the company not taking a lot out of that job. So those sorts of jobs seed our community give back fund, which means when we find a need in community that's financially based, we have a backing behind us that can respond to that need. We try and keep that to things we really believe in, maybe helping out another filmmaker, or there's a really wonderful group here in the Gorge called Culture Seed that helps Latinx youth really embrace being outside, and they needed some help with hiring some rock climbing guys to teach them how to rock climb. And so Story Gorge was able to seed that project for those kids to get out and go rock climbing, which was really cool that we had that ability, right? So the bulk of what you see on our website and any work that we produce is going to be stemming from a cause-based type of organization generally. You will see things on there like REI that we did a film for, right? And that one, although it's a very commercial entity, they didn't want us to sell a single piece of product. They were really interested in that story, and that story was very focused on avalanche awareness and avalanche education, right? While it was still an adventure story, the walk away from that was being safe in the mountains and respecting nature and understanding a little bit of the science behind it as well, if that makes sense. So we very much are a social enterprise, and we strive for that, which I think in short just means that we measure our success not only in our bottom line dollars that we make, but in the impact that our work makes as well. And we tend to value those at the same level, and occasionally one outweighs the other. And oftentimes we find that the smaller projects, the smaller nonprofits with less budgets, enables us to have a greater impact. And so we're gonna measure that success by the impact we have. For example, they have a small budget. They can't really afford our production value that we bring to the table. But what they can afford is us to guide a student or the next round of filmmaker through the process and steward them through the story, and produce still and still have like checks and balances on quality control, and help that student gain a real life experience, oftentimes stipend, and help the client get the messaging that they need and go from there, right? So that's one way that we serve as a social enterprise. The other way, of course, is education, which is huge. We've focused a lot on production, but we can't discount the fact that 50%, almost 50% of our company is education, and how we take these amassed years of combined knowledge, Kyle 10 years, me 19 years, Kyle 12 years now, I think. And then we pass that on. And we do that through a few ways, right? We'll do that through residencies in schools, where we go in and we basically hack the school system and take over a classroom, and we'll make storytelling and documentary filmmaking with iPads the 7th grade language arts curriculum for a semester. That's one way. We do a lot of professional development with teachers, having them take the accessible tools they have, learning the program and being able to integrate into classrooms. So we could serve 30 students in a class, or we could serve 30 teachers, and suddenly hundreds of students are affected, right? And so we're trying to find these ways to find multiple layers of benefit with a small amount of resource. And how far can we spread that, right? And that's very core to our goal. And then professional development, like natural resources conservation groups. We've done some training for Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife of their field crew, right? They obviously aren't going to be getting a full-scale production out there in the field, and their field scientists know the subject better than anybody else. And they have phones and GoPros and things like that. And so we just provide that bridge of knowledge on how to use what they already have or can get fairly inexpensively, and create some content that goes towards that natural resources conservation goal that they're living every day. And when they're ready for a higher production value, they can come to us, or they can delegate to another professional. They know what they're asking for then as well. So that's the other way that we really serve people, is through literally giving our knowledge out and handing out all the trade secrets, right? And through that, people are able to do what they need to do to tell stories internally. And again, just so that they know that when it is time to make the call, they know who to call. And we hope it's us, but we also hope that it's maybe one of our peers, right? And that'd be fine too. So
yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. And you actually made it really easy for me, because I was going to ask you about the education component, because I know that's so integral to the work that you do after going on the website and impacting students and faculty. Because and you also bring up a good point. Like, we all have phones that have cameras on them, but not everyone knows how to use them correctly or optimize them as well as they can. So I think that's very cool what you guys are doing.
Yeah, the key of accessible technology is a huge part of our education model that works, right? Is every student has access at this point to a phone or tablet. And if they don't, it's real easy for us to get a little bit of grant money to make sure they have it, or some community support or something like that, for sure. And we've actually taken it so far as now we're on a year-long contract with a local charter school here in the Dalles. And we're being tasked to create a whole CTE curriculum, career and technical education curriculum, for high school students to see what a career path in media arts could look like. And so we're with them 2 days a week, every week for the whole school year, developing and implementing this curriculum. And it's going pretty well. It's pretty neat to be asked to build a whole design and build a whole thing that will actually empower the next generation of our future peers.
Wow, just incredible. And so a lot of that curriculum, is it through video as well? Like, people watch videos to teach them how to do video, like kind of on a meta level? That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, we have a few layers. We have several curriculums. We built education modules, right? And so everything from the technical side of composition and exposure and focal length and learning those things, to the end-to-end creating a digital story of owning your own story and insight with scripted voiceover and imagery and music and maybe some sound effects, all the way up to making a documentary in a time, 30 hours with us. And we're able to get kids or adults to make a short documentary all on iPads, everything from interview to radio play to first cut, final cut, creating their own music in GarageBand, doing it all on a tablet. And, so there's a varied things that we can do. And then focused education with those professionals who are looking to bring it into the professional world is key.
Wow. That's awesome. It's very, very cool what you guys are doing. Thanks for explaining all of those processes. I have a question for you, Kyle. Oh shoot, what was I gonna say? Well, how about this one? Do you have any crazy stories about, like, the video production world for you? Any times where maybe equipment is messed up, gotten lost, any number of things?
I don't have anything prepared for that question, but I think Mr. O'Connor does.
Oh, there is that video again. All right, I'm back. I don't know what's going on with my video today. All right, I guess I'll keep talking. All right, so it's actually an interesting story. And it has a lot to do with how this actually works in the documentary world when you're asking to tell someone's story, right? So a few years back, I got put on assignment through KCTS 9 in Seattle and OPB in Portland. And it was a show called Earth Fix. And then Oregon Field Guide was the show that pumped it out in Oregon as well. So it's a collaboration between these two TV stations. And the story was about traditional dip net fishing in the Klickitat River, which is on the Washington side of the gorge. It meets the Klickitat confluence with the Columbia River at Lisle, Washington, right there. So upriver a little bit, there's all these fishing platforms. And this is where, Native Americans spend their seasons living on site and doing dip net fishing as they have done traditionally for a very long time. It's a sacred space for them and a space that you can't just go to and start filming. So our first day, I had the producers on set and we had the elders that were doing the interviews for the story on set, and we set up our interviews, we did the thing and all this. And the fishermen were working below, down in the water and near the water. And these are the ones who live there all the time. So we get done with the interviews, everyone leaves, and my assignment is to go back and get the B-roll. Got to go capture all the visuals to supplement the interviews. And so without thinking ahead too much, I gathered my drone pilot and a friend who was a photographer who wanted to check it out. And we went out before sunrise and we tucked ourselves in the rocks to hide behind the rocks. And we started doing all this drone footage of these platforms empty. And being naive and not being very considerate in the moment, we didn't think about those that were actually living on site and checking in first. So we're flying the drone, beautiful imagery. Like I'm excited as a DP, director of photography. And I'm looking down at the monitor and all of a sudden it goes and just shakes. I was like, what in the world was that? Something's wrong with the drone. Oh no. Well, it's smooth now. Let's keep going. And then just a couple minutes later, it shakes again. And I'm like, something's up. So I peek up from behind the rocks and there are 4 dudes double my size coming out of their tents where they were living, and they were less than pleased with a drone in the air above their tents. And they had handfuls of rocks, and they were doing everything they could to throw us out of the air. They were target practicing their rock throws at our drone. Now I have a situation, right? And the body language was that of, I'm ready to fight, what I was seeing. They were not happy. So I tried to take the easy way out, and I tried to tell my crew, let's land the drone away from them, grab it and run. Let's get out of here. And I had a friend with me who was a newspaper photographer in Montana for like 15 years. And he kind of talked me down. He's like, no, man, you got to go talk to them, right? You have to go in and humbly request their forgiveness, and you have to talk to them. And I was scared. I was ready to run. But I took his advice, and I put my camera down by my side, and I walked up and was able to open up some dialogue, explain who we were, why we were there, very apologetically, very humbly, just saying, we're here to honor your story. And honestly, I see why you did this. We didn't ask, and that's on us. And I owned it, and they calmed down. And then I sent everyone else home, and I spent the rest of the day just hanging out with them. And I didn't bring my camera back out at all, the whole day. I was off the clock, and I was just there to develop relationship, right? And that was a couple more visits without the camera. And then I asked permission, and then they invited me in. And so if you watch the show, which is well over 1 million views at this point, you'll see angles and shots that are taken from on the platforms, under the platforms. I tied into their ropes. I stood there with them. I left with 2 huge salmon to eat, and I came back with a book of portraits and photographs that I had taken over my time with them over a period of, took us, a good month and a half, something, of multiple visits to get the shots. And they got a book of images as a gift back. And now I still hear from a couple of them. There's this one guy, Ira, who shows up in the show a lot. He wasn't interviewed, but he's a good chunk of the B-roll. And he checks in on Thanksgiving and stuff, like, hey man, how you doing? Come on down. Let's and it's pretty amazing. And I only tell that story as crazy because the equipment almost failed by human interaction, but it was a really teachable moment in that I learned that if you're going to tell an authentic story, you better have permission to do that. And to do that, you have to build authentic relationship. That can be built over a period of years, days, or minutes. But before the camera comes out, you have to have that permission and that rapport to do it. So that's kind of my crazy story of production that led to a whole new way of approaching my job, really.
Wow. I think it's a very powerful story for any filmmaker to, know, kind of gain permission. And I think a lot of people, when they watch things on TV or they watch a video, they don't realize that there is rapport. There is like this relationship between the person filming, the person, the talent, or whoever's on camera, which is one of the things I really enjoy about filmmaking is, you get access and you have opportunities to do these things. And that's just a testament of your good, journalism skills, or, I think empathy, at the end of the day, being able to relate with others and, go the extra mile to, create a really good project. Well, I want to be cognizant about time. To wrap things up, Kyle, do you have maybe one tip of advice you'd give to a young filmmaker?
Absolutely. I think the number one tip I'd give to a young filmmaker, or anybody really looking to create video, is just pre-production, getting really dialed in on your pre-production and dialed in on, who your audience is and what the purpose of the content you're making is. One of the things that we tell all of our clients, and one thing that we say around the office a lot, is creativity loves constraints, right? And so once again, just like, if you're so pre-planned, are you going to miss the good things? No. And if you have laser focus on your audience and the goal of your video and the messaging of the story that you're telling, what that's going to allow you to do is to make the strongest possible authentic story that you can. And because you have that laser focus, doesn't mean that those are the only people that are going to receive it into their brains, right? That just means that you're going to hit the people that you want to hit where it counts. You're going to get them to the action that you want to get them to. And you're going to have the benefit then of just like every other person is going to see this video too and also be moved by it, So just getting really focused in on those things and doing your pre-production, I think, is the number one tip I'd give.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think we'll end it at that. That was awesome. I want to say a big thank you to Kyle Glenn and Sean O'Connor from Story Gorge. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. I think there's been some awesome bits of inspiration and tips for how people can implement video into for their business. And everyone, please go check out storygorge.com and check out some of these videos and just be blown away by some good story. Maybe bring a tissue box with you too, because it's gonna you guys tell some good stories that captivate and move people. So thank you for coming on to the show.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for tuning in to VidMark, a place for all your video marketing needs. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform and tune in every Thursday morning on either iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and more. For a behind-the-scenes look and some bonus tips, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until next time, good luck with your video marketing efforts, and remember, always hit the mark.